Good evening and welcome to Take Two. Thank you guys for tuning in. We hope you get something out of this time. And again, if you have questions, feel free to type them in and we will get to them. I say that at the beginning when Gil's here. Good evening, Gil. But if you come in, we'll try to remember to announce that again later on as things develop so that if there are any questions from Sunday, you can join in and bring those questions up. But I've got Randy here with me this evening. And last Sunday, I spoke on prayer. And I call it the politics of prayer just only because Jesus is really kind of rebuking the hypocrisy of the Pharisees, where they were making themselves known. And then he also kind of chastises the Greeks who used many words and thought by their many words they would be heard. And instead he says, you're supposed to go to your Father in secret, and your Father who sees in secret is going to hear you. That's kind of, well, let me just read it. Why am I doing that? Matthew chapter 6, verse 5, Jesus says, "When you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites. For they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door, and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask." Let me start off by asking you, Randy. I shared a little bit how I struggle with the idea of prayer sometimes. Do you have any times like that where you struggle, not necessarily to just pray, but what is prayer for? Does it do anything, or is it...
Yeah, because there's a conundrum wrapped up in this where, all the things, at least again, I hate to always go back to what I used to think, but like the sovereignty of God and the, which I'm not saying I don't believe in. I'm just saying, maybe my thoughts about it have
it kind of comes up against it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if he's already, if he's in control, what does my, request do in the grand scheme of everything he's done or has planned? Right? So that conundrum happens, and I think that just beyond that, like I think you talked a little bit about just the difference between what Jesus is saying here and the experience that you've had, as far as, well, I prayed a lot for this one thing to happen, and it hasn't. So then I feel like, personally, I won't throw this on you or anybody else, but there's some discouragement. It's still like, well, why do I keep asking?
Yeah.
When I was young, like really young, I can remember there was a time. There was a time when my grandpa got sick and went to the hospital, and as a little, maybe 6-7-year-old kid, I went to my room and I got down on my knees, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I knew I needed help. You know what I mean? Like I needed help my grandpa.
Yeah.
And I prayed and I prayed, and I remember my grandpa came home the next day, and I remember feeling this nudge, like God was saying, "I heard you." And that really, bolstered my faith.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, that wasn't always the experience. And then I'm like, how do I
balance that? And I've had similar things where I prayed and it seemed very connected, the answers. And it is very encouraging, and it's like bolsters your faith and encourage you, I'm going to pray. And then those times where you do pray and it doesn't happen. And it seems like it's within reach, right? It's not like I'm not asking a whole lot, right? I'm just asking for this little bit, something to go, the way for somebody to get a job or, something like that.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of circumstances that we're confronted with, when we pray, especially later on when I go to Matthew 7, where Jesus says, ask, you will receive, seek, you'll find, knock, it'll be open to you. Sometimes you ask and it doesn't seem like you receive, right? And I just wonder, maybe I'm thinking of receiving differently or the wrong way, and that's kind of what I wanted to get to the heart of here, because when he says, don't pray that you might be seen, and then don't heap up words thinking they're going to be heard, it's like, okay, I'm not supposed to be seen, I'm not supposed to be heard. What else is there in prayer? You know what I mean? If I'm not being seen, and if I'm not, and so not so much the seen, I'm okay with not being seen, but not being heard.
Yeah, how does that?
Yeah, don't I need to be heard? And then he says, go in your closet. And so he kind of shines a light in this area of, it's not the words, but it's that secret of what's happening in you that God is really concerned about, and that's where he wants to interact with us.
For me, it's fascinating because throughout the scriptures, we get a glimpse into the different ways that what we might consider the heroes of the faith have prayed. Right? We see like all throughout Nehemiah, like he's just kind of, he's on the move, but as he's going, he's like,
yeah,
call them arrow prayers, like,
yeah,
real quick, hey God, can you do this?
Yeah.
Like, and God's like in motion with him, right? And things are happening all the time. Or Elijah, like, prayed for the little boy that died, and like this little boy came back to life. Like, man, that's some cool stuff.
Yeah.
And God is right there in the moment with him. But then there's also times where, like Joseph, was taken in.
Yeah.
He was made a slave, and he was in slavery praying for
deliverance. Yeah, for to be heard.
And
yeah.
he didn't get an answer to his prayer either.
Yeah, and so it's troubling if we think of it as, well, if God answers, I'm good with him, and if he doesn't answer, something's wrong with me, because that's kind of what we see in some areas of faith. We kind of see that a little bit with Job and his hardship and his friends. God wouldn't ever do this to someone who's good with him, so there must be sin in your life for this calamity to befall you. Yeah. And we do have this kind of shame-reward mentality that we carry into, I think, our relationship with God that can be very damaging. Hey, Brianna. Hi, Crane. Hey, our wives are here. So. And Gil. He's not our wife, but anyway. Randy is real low. Okay. You know what?
Hello.
That should be better. I'm sorry. I did a recording with this mic,
on the cardio,
and it was just picking up me. So hopefully that's better. Sorry, Randy. We'll repeat everything. Thanks, Gil. But that shame-reward culture seems to seep into our Christian life, sometimes in the weirdest ways, because it's, I think, so prevalent in our society and how we see things. And I think it happens with me in this area of prayer, where I feel like I have to have everything right with God. It's the effectual prayer of a righteous man avails much, right? One of the scriptures say. And it's like, okay, does that mean I have to be righteous for my prayer to be heard? Or is there different meaning hidden in there that is more what I was trying to point to here, relational, right? This idea, pray to your Father, and the word in the Aramaic is Abba, right? Yeah. And it's like that, hearing that, pray to your daddy, and it's so weird because I know, like, you use that word every now and then when you're praying, and whenever I hear that word, for some reason, I always get like, I don't know, it just, daddy seems like irreverent in some ways, but it's not. It's actually probably a closer term we're supposed to see and understand, right?
Yeah.
And just hearing that at the beginning, when you pray to your Abba, your daddy, then that makes it feel different, right?
It does, yeah. Yeah, I used to, and this is where for me, I had the same thing. So I used to work at a group home, and the lady there she was my boss, but she was also the case manager for the girls in the house where I was a group home father of all words, right? I remember we'd pray for the girls, and so she would come over and she would start by saying, and she would just kind of be like, and her name was Chris, and she was a fantastic woman, but like this idea of like, she would sit down and just be like, as if God is sitting right next to her, she's going to have a conversation with him. So she would just be like, Dad, and then she would start, like, thinking about the girls and talking about the girls, and I was just like, I was always struck with like this level of intimacy that she had with God that I was like, I want that too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what prayer does, right? Like, that's why I think, I mean, for sure in the case of Joseph, and this is why it's frustrating, God had foreknowledge, right? God saw, like, just wait there, Joe. It's not going to be like this forever, right? Like, we're going to fix some other stuff with you, right? You're gonna come in handy, but right now you gotta hold on to where you're at. Whatever, But in other cases like Nehemiah, where it's like, no, I think that Nehemiah was displaying the heart of God. And so it just makes sense that as he's going about this business that he knows is kingdom work, right? That God is there with him and helping him and going with him and moving obstacles.
Yeah.
Making it so the king is supplying the lumber. You know what I mean? Like all of these different things. And so to me that there's some of it that makes sense. This is the intimacy of just being in step with God. Like, I can pray and he's moving with me.
Right.
And other times, God might be going, hold on, Randy. That's, you know what I mean? Like, something else is coming down the pike and you don't see it yet.
Yeah, and that is very relational, right? When you kind of are in that dynamic with God, then the prayers seem to match the flow of what God's doing.
Yeah.
And this idea, I mean, we'll get into next week, the will of God a little bit more in the, Lord's Prayer. But it seems like that's an important part of this understanding and this asking and receiving maybe is just knowing who he is. So what we ask is in line with his kingdom, his heart, his character, right? Those kinds of things. And that allows us to maybe be more in a place where we're able to receive because we are doing the work and understanding those things. The struggles are when it seems like we're doing those things, we're following as best we can, but the things aren't lining up, right? I mean, I almost wish, like the book of Job, it didn't end well for Job. I just wanted to see what would happen then. You know what I mean? It's like, no, he got the stuff back. He got the kids back. There's a lot of things happening in Job, or even in Joseph. You did all this time in prison, and you were, betrayed by your brothers, accused falsely, but still you got up to second in command, right? What happens to the guy who that doesn't happen to, right? The person who's betrayed, the person who stays in prison, who cries out but doesn't get delivered, and that's where that idea of, sovereignty and, okay, so what, is this the will of God for me to be here, to be, betrayed by my brothers? Is that really? Because I have a hard time accepting that, and that's where the freedoms that we have come into play. So then what does prayer do there if it doesn't get me out of prison? Or the circumstance I mentioned, like the child who has cancer, the friend who's in the hospital and has been there for months, or doesn't make it out. What do you do then? And before I just tell you kind of how I wrestle with this, how do you wrestle with it?
I mean, this is serious. So, I will come. I know you on Sunday you gave a little confession, so I will do the same. I struggle with prayer when I'm feeling that way, right? When I feel like defeat, and I'm praying for deliverance and I'm getting silence, right? And then like I said, then my prayer life suffers, and sometimes I've had that happen for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And I don't feel this intimacy with God. I don't feel like I'm in step with Him, and I feel like, maybe I feel like my feelings are hurt, or whatever it might be. But in our house, it's funny because it can be because I can feel that way, and yet I have children, so I'm trying to, and I'm horrible at this. I know I'm not going to claim to be a saint about it, but like right now, we're teaching Bella how to pray, right? And so she's a constant reminder to me, because if she stubs her toe, Daddy, will you pray to Jesus? My toe, she's crying.
Yeah.
Or I can't sleep, or I had bad dreams. Will you pray to Jesus? Like that's her first step, her first go-to for everything is like, can you pray? And so cool. I'm constantly like going, yes, yeah, of course we're gonna pray. But in my head, I was like, I'm just gonna get her some Tylenol. And, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm just gonna stop the crying. Yeah, I'm gonna fix this.
And so there's that, and then in little ways, those are convictions to me, because I want to do that too. I want like my first instinct to be like reach out for God, but it's not that way always.
Yeah.
Bree had we lost her friend a month ago.
Yeah.
And we were definitely praying for a different outcome.
Yeah.
And it wasn't what we hoped for. It wasn't what we prayed for. And on the other side of that, we're also watching that friend's family go through their own hell, right? Yeah. And those are not things that I don't know. I don't know what to do with that. We had held on to hope, as much as a person can, I think, until the news came. And so that's a struggle. And I know that's a struggle for a lot of people, especially in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and there's so many things being said, and people are pulling things from Scripture in so many ways, telling you that if you just have faith, and I came out of a church early on when I first became a follower of Christ, that was very Pentecostal, kind of name it, claim it, prosperity gospel. And it was like drilled into us, don't doubt, don't doubt, don't doubt. You just got to hold on to faith, hold on to faith, hold on to faith. And you find yourself wrestling like, I don't want to be the one who betrays and stops this from happening. When my mom had cancer and we found out it had gone to stage 4 and was spreading throughout her body, part of me said, okay, I have to get ready for what could happen very likely. And that was part of me was like, no, you can't accept that. You've got to still pray for healing, and then we went to City Hope and they gave us some, things that gave us hope. But then those things didn't fall through. And eventually I had to come to the place where I said, you know what? I don't believe she's going to be healed. And I even stopped praying for her to be healed and started praying for us to be able to comfort her, speak to her, and be with her through that time. And it almost felt like a betrayal to her. It's like, I still prayed for her, Lord, I'd love for you to heal her. It's like I don't say the words just kind of like the Nehemiah prayer. It's just going, I'm driving and I'm thinking, praying. It seems like I'm always in this dialogue with God, and He knows my, ADD, and He's fine with it, so it can jump from all these different places. But those things happen. I'm praying, oh yeah, I'd love to see her healed, but okay, help me to deal with this, and what can we do for this? And it's a struggle, because am I betraying her because I didn't pray? There's some Christians, I use that term, who would say, why did you doubt? That doubt is what caused Peter to sink. That's what caused the cancer to spread. And it's like, oh, great, that's all I need is more shame, to deal with these things. But some people are locked into this, holding on to something, because if I doubt. And do you think that's what Jesus means, like in Matthew 7 when he's saying, seek, you'll find, knock, it'll be open, ask and it'll be given?
Do I think he's asking us to have this unending hope?
Well, I mean, because I think he is asking us to have hope.
Yeah.
But I think it's different than expecting an answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so, like in the case with my mom, I don't believe I was wrong to stop praying for healing and start praying for something else. I felt like this was the right thing in my relationship with God and the way I was feeling and seeing these things. That seemed to be the direction, and there was still hope.
Yeah.
Right? There was still hope, but I guess the question is, like, when you pray, believe that you have received. What does that mean in these kinds of situations?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, this is why I think twofold, right? This is why people lose faith.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also why some people have an even more intimate relationship with God.
Yeah.
Right? Like, one of those two things is going to result from this. Like, either we're going to be like, he didn't do what I asked, even though he said he would, and I believed, right? Like, I put all my eggs in this basket of belief.
My chips were all in, yeah.
And I am completely now let down. And is he even real? Is he even good? Can I even rely on him for anything, right?
Yeah.
Is my soul saved with him, right? Like, like if you're going, if you're wondering all these things. So, and then on the other hand, some people will go through something like that, and if it kind of forces their hand to even dig deeper, right? To like to go, where else am I going to go? Like,
yeah, and that's what I love about the Matthew 7 passage, right? Because if your child asks for this, won't you give them that? And then if you, being evil, know how to give good things, how much more will your Heavenly Father? It's that appeal to what I do know, that sense, right? And I shared some circumstances with me as a father where I was unable to change the circumstances. I was unable to stop, I was unable to answer why things have happened. I was unable to stop the pain that they were going through. All I could do was be present, right? All I could do is be there and hold them and try to comfort them just with my love, right? And I think that there is something in that is actually a part of prayer with what Jesus is saying. As your parents would do to your kids, then God's going to do with you. He's going to be present with you. And yeah, he might not be able to bring, the healing or not, it's not that he's not able. I don't even know how that works.
That healing is part of how we develop and grow as people.
Yeah.
And how we're able to help other people go through painful circumstances. So we're always like, I get that, and I get maybe that's a platitude, but at the same time, there's truth in that because I've seen it happen. And so, I mean, I had, I think I've shared this with you before, but when my firstborn, when Judah was 2.5, he was diagnosed. At the time, he was diagnosed with moderate autism, and I asked questions like, well, what does that mean? Like, what's that look like in 20 years or 30 years? And when he's 50, what's up? And the lady was like, well, some people with this diagnosis are able to, find menial jobs and, but he'll probably not ever be on his own. Mm-hmm. All these things. It was like the most horrible thing you could hear when you have a 2.5-year-old. And I still want to punch that lady in the throat. But
yeah, that's.
But so I went through like a long period of like I was mad at God, I think I told you that it was at least 6 months. It might have been much longer than that, but before I even started to heal, it was 6 months.
Yeah.
And now, like, in hindsight, like, that's why I was telling you, like, he just got his first job.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he didn't go through a special program. He just, like, he interviewed on his own. Like, you know what I mean? It was like,
Yeah.
it's like, so I do see God answering prayers, just maybe not the way I wanted him to at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 16 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. It's mysterious.
Let me push into you like what pushes back to me when those things happen. Was it God answering prayer? How do you know it just isn't something that would have happened?
Yeah.
Right? Those kinds of things. And the reason I'm pushing in that, because this whole idea of I have to get something for what I'm asking is what I wrestle with, right? This is what we've asked for. How do I know it's God? And I just feel like, gosh, how do you explain God, right? I mean, how do you go into this? I feel like the sovereignty of God is not as we think it is, like the will of God, and I'm kind of tipping my cards for next week. I don't think the will of God is like this, fine line we have to follow, and it's these things. I feel like the will of God is a river, right? And it's flowing, and it's going from here, and it's getting to there. And not all the water is going to get there. Some of the water is going to splash up on the rocks. Some of the water is going to swirl around here. I mean, but it's not changing what's happening, right? And our lives are moving in this direction. And sometimes, you get the job. Sometimes you get the healing. Sometimes, you get the girl. I don't know. It just sounds like should they? It's sometimes things go your way with the things that you're asking, and it's all just part of this stream that's going there, because it's just moving in that direction, right? But when you don't get the healing, it doesn't stop this river from moving in that direction, and it doesn't stop you being part of or in God's will. You're still a part of that water that's rushing down. You're still participating in the will, the work, the kingdom of God in this, sense. It just doesn't look like we're used to looking, which is I want to have a little bit more control of how it looks. Mm-hmm. I want to know if he hears, this is how he hears, this is how he answers. And then if it doesn't work, I have to find that platitude, yes, no, or not yet, kind of things that give me comfort, which again could mean anything if you look at it. You could believe in God and say that, and not believe in God, and that comes true, right? So how does it all work together? And I think I just need to readjust my image of how God works, how big God is, and deal more in that daddy understanding.
Yeah.
Because then I'm not just, I don't matter, right? I mean, consider the sparrows, right? You're more valuable than they are, that your hair is numbered. Those things, like, okay, so even though I might splash up on the rock, I matter. I'm still a part of the family. I still am present. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
it's actually, what, so speaking of my son Judah, when I was talking to him, this was, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and we were talking about the sovereignty of God, right? Mm-hmm. Which, he's 14 at the time, right? Like,
yeah.
But that's the exact illustration he gave me. Like he heard what I was saying and like, thought through it some, and then he was like, so you're saying it's like a river, and like, what I mean? Like, and it was pretty interesting because that's what he took from it. Mm-hmm. Same idea, like there's maybe a beginning and an end, mm-hmm. but he's not so much micromanaging every move.
Yeah,
I get that, and I get what you're saying. I feel like for me, maybe in this circumstance, for me to say, I've seen God answer prayers in his life. Um, Maybe that doesn't matter so much to me as seeing where my son is and still
Yeah.
being thankful.
Yeah. And again, that gets to the daddy part, right?
Yeah.
That gets to the relational aspect of prayer, because I think, at least in my experience, that's what's been important. When I don't feel like God's there and I don't think that God cares, I still go to him and pray, which is, I don't know, to me that's something, right? That means something to me, that I still will go there even though I feel like you're not. But it's like, no, where else can I go? This is the only place I can go. And this is where my life comes from. This is my source. This is, and again, it is that secret place in me that cries out to the, secret place of God. And so to me, that's been everything. That
Yeah.
that means so much to me. It's almost like, again, my soul is crying out for what my head just can't figure out.
I mean, and that's the essence of faith.
Yeah.
We're going, I can't, like you didn't answer the last three prayers, but I still need you, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm still gonna, like, I'm still like wailing out because, like I said, where else am I gonna go?
Yeah. And again, whenever I start to try and figure God out, and I go through kind of that Reformed theology, or I go through that kind of that chess master theology, which I've believed for most of the time, still believe that to some degree, but then throw in this relational ideology, and it just kind of doesn't fit in either one of these, right?
Yeah.
But it does fit in both of them, if that makes sense. In other words, you can have all these other things, but if you don't have this, none of these work,
Yeah.
at least for me. If I don't have this, then I don't want either of those. Kind of, I don't know. If I don't matter to him, if he doesn't care, then his sovereignty doesn't mean a whole lot to me. If he doesn't really care about me, then that would be a terrible thing. If he's just sovereign, does whatever he wants, but doesn't have regard to people,
Yeah.
which, we don't believe because of Christ. But those are the things that, again, it goes back to that love.
I remember hearing this story. I shared it maybe the last time I spoke, or time before that maybe, but this story about it was actually not a story, it was a blog post I read where this guy was talking about his trip to Israel, and he said, he got off the airplane and went to the bathroom because it's a long flight. And he said while he was in there, he saw a dad, Jewish family, Jewish dad and son, father and son, and looked like the son had been crying, looked like he got in trouble, probably for wandering away or whatever happens in airports, right? And he said, but at this point when he walked in and he saw the transaction, he said it was like the dad was done being mad, right? And he got down on his knees, or down to the kid's level, so he could look him in the face, and he said, and this is just an interesting spin on what we're talking about with this father-son thing, or this idea of Abba. He said, when I'm asking you to obey me, I want you to call me Abba. And I was like, whoa. Because that's like daddy, like you said, is it too irreverent? But it's also more than just intimacy. It's like we're in this together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I want you to stay close to me. Yeah, I want you to get lost here at the airport. I want you to stay close to me, and I want you to call me Abba.
Yeah.
It's pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's, again, I think it's really what Jesus is pushing to in this. We can't miss that word in this context of prayer. We also can't miss, and we'll get into it a little bit next week too, the idea of prayer, and he seems to always include things like verse 12 in Matthew 7. So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. There's also this, you praying and you better be nice, right? It's kind of like this is connected to that in some, way. And it's funny, even when he's talking about moving mountains and you need to forgive if someone's forgiving you, you need to do it's like, what? I am asking for mountains to move. Why do I have to talk about forgiveness? And again, we lose that understanding of connection, in the our Father, it's not my Father,
Yeah.
A lot of that is just that forgive us as we forgive those, right? There's this pluralistic language that's being used that seems to be integrated in a lot of the idea of prayer with Jesus that I find fascinating. Because for us, many times, I thought I was in the closet. I thought it was just me and God, but it's me and God understanding I'm part of this collective,
Yeah.
right? And if it doesn't show up, maybe even in my prayer, then, it's again, Lord, thank you for this parking spot. It's like, well, I'm glad you got it, but that lady with the bad hip's gonna walk twice as far now. God has favor with me.
Do we extend this into the Dodgers, or we can't go there?
I don't care. I'm just happy they won last night. But please, Lord, let them win. But those things, like, I don't think God really cares if the Dodgers win or not. I don't think God cares if I'm a dog trainer or I'm an electrician. And I use that word care lightly. I don't think that's the important thing, right? I think he cares what kind of dog trainer I am to people. I think he cares how I act as electrician with people. He cares about how I conduct myself wherever I'm at with whatever I do, right? He at the game, I went to the Dodger game last night with my son, and there were some Giants fans sitting there, and everyone's, harassing them and stuff. It was pretty cordial. There was one guy who's a little drunk, and it was like, okay, watch that guy. But otherwise, it was kind of just joking back and forth. And when the Dodgers had clearly won, they were getting up and leaving early, and everyone was harassing them, right? When it's just, right? Everyone's just telling them. And, it's just kind of funny, egging at them. But I don't think, that them winning matters. How I treat those people matters, right? If I'm going to be a jerk and, try and, I don't know, humiliate them or just make them feel bad, or some people who just get angry and violent, well, then God cares, right? Those are things that are in violation of his character. Me being a dog trainer, I don't think it's in violation of his character. Those kinds of things.
Right.
Rooting for the Dodgers, I don't think is in
Right.
violation of the character of God. Rooting for the Giants is. Just kidding.
But even like there were tax collectors in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't make them change their job,
Yeah.
just the way they did their job.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I shouldn't say made, but like that's what happened, right?
Yeah. He just kind of called them to be,
Yeah.
what he believed they needed to see themselves as children, loved, as belonging to the Father, part of the work, part of the kingdom. And I think, that's moving closer to the will of God. And so, again, that's very relational, right? That's not an answer of who's going to win, this conference or the World Series. I don't think God really cares, Again, that word cared. I don't know
I
what
get
other
what
word.
you're saying.
I don't think God's concerned with those things. I don't think he's like, oh.
I mean, it's a game after all. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a
Yeah. But I mean, even in, Gosh, that can branch out though to other things. That can branch out into other areas of life, right? Um, and it gets a little messy because again, this whole sovereignty thing is beyond our ability to understand. The best we can do is grapple with it, and wrestle through things. But there's a lot of things that I don't think God is so concerned about like we are. And it's not that they aren't important to us and God doesn't care about what we feel. It's just there's a lot of water going down this way, right? And sometimes this is part of that river. And sometimes it's difficult and sometimes it's shiny and you can swim in it. And, it just, that's kind of how life is. And I've had to accept that, I think, to keep myself from going crazy mentally about this. If I don't accept that, it's okay sometimes that difficult things happen. Not okay that, like no big deal. That's going to happen in life. In the world, we will have trouble.
Yep.
Right? And I should expect it to happen. And it's not because I'm out of God's will. It's just a part of how things are at this time. And I don't know if, when, how things will change, but that seems to be an important part of that. So then how does that affect my prayer? If in this world I'm going to have trouble, or the poor you will have with you, these things that just seem, well, that's not good either, Lord. How do I pray with these things present and a part of life? Do I pray for them to stop, or do I pray for myself to learn how to care and love others in the midst of it? I mean, that's where I go, because I don't know where else to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's another, that's another conundrum. But maybe it's both and like. But yeah, I don't know. We're gonna raise more questions than we answer.
Then I'm doing my job. I mean, I hope though, even in that statement, there is hope. Like you mentioned earlier, I still have hope, even though there's suffering. I still have hope, even though difficult things happen and heartbreaking things happen. I still have hope, and it's okay to have hope and hurt at the same time. And I think that's an important, epiphany for me in my faith, is to recognize these things happen. They work hand in hand, and God is close to the brokenhearted. As the scripture says, why can't he just stop the brokenhearted? Well, that's just not how things are. And so God really deals in reality, and so this is how it is, and this is where he shows up.
Yep.
I don't know, if you're expecting a nice, happy thing, this might not be it. But I hope it's something that draws us into that depth of relationship.
Yeah, and I think that's what this whole portion of Scripture is pointing toward.
Yeah.
These guys are wanting to be recognized. These guys, the Greek folks with their fancy language and many words, they don't have this relationship, and that's why we're supposed to go be alone with God.
Yeah.
And
call him Daddy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's the heart of what he's saying here. And so when we start thinking about how do we get prayers answered, how do we get these things done, I think we're missing the point. It's like, how can I go to my God as that endearing parent, right? And again, I mentioned too that Jesus uses this language, but if you have a hard time with Daddy for whatever reasons, you don't have to use that language, right? It's not like, oh, that's the word you have to use. I talked to someone today, and she mentioned that it was important to her that I mentioned that at the beginning, that it wasn't just a male. That
Yeah.
it wasn't that just, okay, it has to be that father figure. It could be, you know, there's plenty of times where a mother or a female presentation is used for God.
Yep.
And so we
Yep.
know that God's not a man, right, or a woman. And so this is just language that Jesus used to help us understand. And so whatever
Yeah.
language will help you to understand.
And
this.
particularly his audience that were,
At that culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, father was very big. It was a big thing in that time. And I mentioned some of that too, just the whole idea of what the fathers were in both cultures.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, but there's definitely probably to some degree some in our culture we're reading this and we're just perpetrating
Mm-hmm.
or extending this whole idea of like that doesn't really have a place anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's good that you acknowledged it. And I'm just saying, I'm calling myself out because a lot of times I do the same thing when I'm teaching or when I'm studying or when I'm praying or whatever it is. Like I'm extending old culture.
Yeah. And, you know, gosh, we do that in so many ways. We miss the point when we focus on those things, right? You know, I have to talk about farmers because that's what Jesus talked about.
Right.
You know, it's like, I don't know anything about farming. You know, it's like, well, can I use another illustration besides a farmer planting seeds, you know? But those are things to help us connect to, you know, what we do understand. And so hopefully this can help us at least connect to the point that Jesus is trying to make by using this. You know, as a parent especially, I find it I think I've learned more about God by being a parent than I have just about anything else, right? I mean, the ideas of loving someone with this unconditional thing shows up most, I think, in that relationship of mine. And so it's revealed to me a lot about who God is by how I feel. And that's why I love that Matthew passage. With you then, right, he's like saying, see how you feel? That's something's going on there that should help you understand God.
Yeah.
Right? And I love that because I can feel that, right? It's like, I don't know about God, but I know about what I feel towards my kid, you know? And so to me, that is so helpful. And kind of, again, goes back to the heart of what I think Jesus is getting to.
Yep. Yep.
Any final thoughts or things that you would like to throw out there regarding prayer or these passages?
Yeah, I mean, not anything new or exciting. I just think this idea of the purpose of prayer, which is kind of always maybe has been a little bit of an enigma, because am I only praying to ask for stuff? 'Cause I feel like that a lot, or am I just bringing a conversation to God about like what's happening in life? I feel like it always leads in, there's so funny when people are trying to teach you how to pray and they're like, here we have this, here's an acronym, here's ACTS, like, you know what I mean? Make sure you acknowledge God before you ask for anything. You know what I mean? Like those types of things. Just like, man, why don't you? No, we don't need to follow the steps.
How you doing, man?
Hey.
Antonio, how you doing, man?
Good, I'm good.
Are you the Antonio I know?
I am the Antonio you know.
There you are. I see you now, man. We're just finishing up a podcast, man. But yeah.
Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no worries, man. Good to see you, guy.
Good to see you.
Yeah, I got to talk with you, man. See what's up.
Well,
go
let's
ahead.
wrap. Let's wrap.
No, I appreciate that because it is a conversation, right? It is something that's fluid and moving, kind of going with that river analogy and stuff. So, very good. All right, you guys. Well, thank you. We got a friend here right now, so we're gonna check on out. And thank you guys for tuning in. If you have any questions, again, you can post them and bring them here Sunday, and we'll try and get to those. And appreciate you guys joining in. Take care.